Thank you. Trade is good. And in this ever-globalizing world, it needs to be embraced more than ever, not vilified. This is something that is basically agreed upon by nearly all economists. And how economists often quantify the benefits of trade is through a model called the Production's Possibilities Frontier. It can get a little complicated, so I'm going to simplify this for you tonight in its most bare, basic form possible by comparing avocados to tigers. And we're going to use people as opposed to countries because they are far less complex economic systems. Basically, in any given day, we are limited by the amount of skill, resources, and time to the acquisition of goods we need in order to survive. And so therefore, when we choose to acquire one thing, we have to give up something else. This is called opportunity cost. If we were to look at this example, person number one in any given day, on average, could either acquire 100 avocados or kill 50 tigers. We need to ignore the logistical realities of anyone being able to kill a tiger with their bare hands, let alone 50, or why they would want to. But anyway, 50 avocados or 100 avocados or 50 tigers. So therefore, for every one tiger he chooses to kill, he has to give up 2 avocados. Person number 2 is significantly less productive overall, but much better at getting avocados than killing tigers. I imagine most of us would be more like person number 2. In any given day, they could either have 80 avocados or just 10 tigers. So the equivalent here is for every one tiger he chooses to kill, he will lose 8 avocados. This is where trade comes in. Because if they choose to work together, they could both benefit. Meet in the middle. Exchange 1 tiger for 4 avocados. Therefore, person number 1 would double the amount of avocados he could get on his own, and person number 2 could double the amount of tigers he could get for his 8 avocados. Fundamentally, this is the root of why trade is great. But that's not it. Trade can even help create jobs. It's true. I know a lot of you are sitting here thinking, but wait, I thought that trade leads to job loss. But the reality is the overwhelming majority of job loss in the past several decades have been because of automation. We are losing jobs to robots, not foreigners. And let me explain how trade can actually create jobs. It's through basically incentivizing consumption. It is estimated that over 70% of America's gross domestic product is caused or is directly related to consumption. This is what I mean. Let's say I own a restaurant that sold avocado and tiger burgers. And I used to charge $10 for this. But thanks to trade, I am able to get my ingredients significantly cheaper now, right? Because I can double the amount of avocados I would have been able to afford on my own. So theoretically, I could lower the cost of this. I could pass these discounts off to my customers. Let's say now start charging $5 a burger, but still maintaining my profit margin because my ingredients just got cheaper, right? So because of this, let's say on average I used to get 50 customers a day. Now I have 100 because my burgers are cheap and delicious, right? So in order to keep up with the demand, I would have to hire more staff. I would need to have another chef. I would have to hire another waitress or waiter. I would have to hire another person to manage the register, thus creating jobs. Because if I don't keep up with this demand, then my restaurant will basically be like Taco Bell drive-thru at 2 in the morning, which I'm sure for any of you who've ever been, you all had this question. Why is the line so long all the time? Hire somebody, please. You know it's true. Trade, in fact, is so important to economies that in the last century, we have not seen any country that did not trade reach high levels of prosperity. Let me give you some examples. Using Canada as a benchmark here, as you can see, Canada's GDP per capita, their economy essentially, experienced pretty steady growth over the last half a century because they've always been open to trade. Now, in contrast, let's take a look at 3 other countries that didn't do this. First, we have Myanmar, a country located in Southeast Asia. Pretty much since its independence, it has been governed by a military dictatorship that isolated itself from the rest of the world. And it just has recently opened up their country to trade to the outside world. Coca-Cola recently just came in. It was one of the last countries in the world without Coke until recently. And as you can see, the exact moment in time when this happened, because their economy skyrocketed once they opened up. Here's another greater example, China. Under Mao's communist era, there was literally no growth at all. And after his passing and economic reforms were passed, China shot up like fireworks here, where now it is the world's factory, with the people having the highest standard of living it has ever had in all of its history. Lastly, let's take a look at Cuba. Cuba, after the Cuban Revolution, experienced modest growth because it traded with the Soviet Union. But what you notice here is that in 1991, when the Soviet Union collapsed, Cuba also felt the pressure of it. Because after the Soviet Union collapsed, there was no longer any investment in trading between the two countries. And as you can clearly see here, Cuba's economy absolutely fideled down. You guys like that, huh? And they would not experience, oh, I have more. And they would not be able to get out of this rut until they also opened themselves up to trade and tourism to the rest of the world. See, in fact, you might not know this, but trade is so important that you can even use it as a geopolitical weapon where countries can impose their will on other countries simply by not trading with them in what is known as trade sanctions. So let's take a look at 3 examples. On the upper left here, we have Iran. As you can see, Iran was doing pretty well economically, and then the Iranian Revolution happened. And as a sign of our disapproval, the United States and much of the United Nations imposed trade sanctions on Iran. And as you can see, their economy dropped like nothing else, and it has never really recovered since. If we look at Zimbabwe in the upper right, Zimbabwe was kind of teetering along until of accusations that the president, Robert Mugabe, committed voter fraud and human rights abuses. And so the EU and the UN also imposed trade sanctions on Zimbabwe, and look what happened to their economy. The only reason they've rebounded just a little bit since is because they've established new trade deals with China. And lastly, we have Russia. Very recent data, as you can see, from 2012 to 2014. Their economy was doing pretty well, primarily from the export and trade of their massive reserves of fossil fuel. But what happened was Russia basically decided to illegally put in some soldiers on Crimea, and we didn't like that either. And so the United States and the United States and the UN sanctioned them, and look at their economy in 2015 compared to 2014. Absolutely devastated. So as I have shown you, trade is insanely important, and it is not a zero-sum game where only one country wins and another country loses. Often when taken in its whole, trade benefits everybody. We need to encourage good, responsible trade deals with the rest of the world, not push for isolation. That would be a mistake. And besides, without trade, there would not be enough guacamole to go around. Thank you very much.